I think the Kremlin knows they're not going to have that demand met. That the best they can do in the near term on a ceasefire is something along the existing battlefront. That you freeze the forces in place, that becomes the ceasefire line. So I suspect that making this more extravagant claim on all four of the provinces that they think should be Russian, that it's for domestic political purposes in Russia, but also to be used as a bargaining chip to get something else.
He used to be the United Nations ambassador, America's ambassador to the United Nations. If anyone should understand the Russians, it ought to be him. And it's like he hasn't been paying any attention at all. To the Russians, this is Russian territory. These are Russian people. The reason why they are putting everything into this fight and why so many people are signing up, because they believe in the cause. They recognize it's a proxy war by the entire West writ large. Remember, 50 nations we bragged about forever are going into this to help Ukraine. So they recognize it as an existential fight that they must win. And they started this thing because of potential for NATO on their borders and how the ethnic Russians were being treated within Ukraine. And they are emphatic that they continue to say the absolute minimum conditions are not just the territory that I mentioned, but also a change in the Ukrainian constitution, which goes back to the Minsk Accords, which says that all the rest of the Russians on the Ukraine side of the line also have to have protections, this demilitarization, that the armed forces of the Ukraine side have to be reduced to a certain level, basically making them a police force and nothing else, something that couldn't pose any threat to the Russians anywhere inside or outside of Ukraine. And then obviously the territory itself, and naturally no NATO. Those are the conditions which have never changed for Russia and which they have the capacity to win. But you see, Bolton likes thinking that Putin can just go, yeah, forget all that. Never mind. Yeah, if we'll just stop wherever we are right now and just call it a day. I mean, Putin it would be run out of town on a rail. I mean, that would be the one thing that could potentially get him in trouble. But that leads to the next one here, because this one is somewhat more bizarre here, because this is a frequent commentator in UK media, as a former colonel. His name is Hamish de Gordon, I believe his name is, and he's going to talk about, man, you talk about a detachment from reality. He's basically saying the Russians are about to fall apart.
Putin, I think the Russian army itself is reaching its culminating point, in other words, running out of steam. And I think Putin is probably sitting very uncomfortably in the Kremlin at the moment, realizing that he's not going to achieve his objectives. The population are realizing, quite what a devastating thing he's done to the Russian country and the Russian people. And no doubt there will be a number of Russian generals and Russian politicians who are thinking about removing him and taking up the mantle themselves. We shall see. But let's hope that pressure does get Putin to the negotiation table before it's too late.
Before it's too late for what? I mean, you talk about their culmination. I mean, on what planet are you from? You have to not read anything except apparently the BBC, I guess, because if you're reading anything that's remotely objective, I just showed you from The Economist. I mean, I think maybe that's something that people read in Britain, right? So at least sometimes this tells you that Russia is accelerating. They're not culminating. They're getting even bigger. And I'm trying to figure out what are you guys thinking is going to lead to this? Because look, the Russians are only going to continue to expand their capabilities. They're only going to get larger, bigger, and stronger. And I want to look at one other British guy here, because that was a colonel. This is a former general who inexplicably, and I don't know any source that he has to back this up, says that the Ukraine side has equalized artillery production.
It is going to take some time for Europe to step up its defense industry, but the Ukrainians themselves are doing an amazing job at generating an incredibly adaptable organic defense industry there They're already, with European support, able to pretty much produce the same amount of ammunition, artillery ammunition, that the Russians can, and they're beating the Russians when it comes to the development and incredibly agile transformation of using drones and on the battlefield. So it's going to be hard without US support. It definitely makes Ukraine more vulnerable. But if we put our minds to it, we can make sure that Ukraine's got the means to defend itself.
So what? The Ukraine side has equalized the amount of artillery shells that Russia has. We just had General Cavoli, the U.S. commander of European Command, just 2 months ago, said that actually Russia is substantially outproducing the West. I think the number was by a factor of 3. And that in terms of artillery production, the actual artillery piece, tank production, armored vehicle production, we're talking in the thousands each year. There is no equivalent capacity on the Ukraine side there. Apparently, they are producing some armored vehicles. I saw one on the battlefield the other day, but it's relatively small. It's in probably dozens and scores maybe, but not thousands like the Russian side is doing. So what is he talking about here? I mean, that's just fantasy, and you don't even have to trust anybody's word for it. You know, well, the Russians say this, Cavoli says that, the British guy says this. You just have to look on the battlefield. The line keeps going to the west every day. Some want to get some kind of optimism and hope because the pace has slowed, not stopped, but slowed, but it's only slowed. The manpower, the Ukraine side, unequivocally by even the Ukrainians themselves, the Ukraine General Staff has admitted they can't even force mobilize enough people to offset losses every day. So they are shrinking. The Russian side is much, much larger and getting bigger. And then the ammunition, you can just see it on the ground. You saw The Economist put that in there. Not Russian propaganda. The Economist is putting those numbers up there. You see the same thing. Even the Institute for the Study of War, which is as pro-Ukraine as you can get and anti-Russian, even they have to admit that the Russian side is outproducing the Ukraine side. There is nothing to base this up. And who benefits from this? It's not the Ukraine side. They don't. It's just arrogance and presumption on the side of the West that they keep going down this path and just remaining ardently detached from reality. And the fact that Trump was so irate on the top of that, both with the True Social and with the video that we showed you at the beginning of this, one has to wonder, is he being briefed on this? Does he not know that Ukraine has been firing hundreds of drones at Moscow, for example? Just Russia's been effective at shooting them down because they have the air defense capacity. The Ukraine side hasn't because they don't have it. America doesn't have it. Europe doesn't have it. Nobody has enough to give them. And it's playing out on the battlefield at the strategic level and at the tactical level. So upon what basis do you want to have this fiction? Do you help your side when you keep telling over and over that things are getting better, that Ukraine is now doing an amazing job at this, but you don't see it reality on the battlefield? So you're fooling your people into continuing to support something that means more of their money, more of their ammunition will just be thrown in the trash. It'll just be gone into, it's a literal black hole. Whatever you send into Ukraine will be used, but it won't change the outcome, but it will deplete your coffers. It will cost you money to replace. So, and unless this is as crass as I'm sure a lot of people say it probably is, that the defense industry and the defense industrial base, they benefit. I mean, if you want to look at who benefits, that's no question that they benefit. But that's a tiny little sliver of the society. It's a tiny sliver of the economy. That doesn't even help the British economy or the American economy or the Germans or anybody else. It helps that industry alone. It doesn't help the economy because remember, this is not like, building cars or washing machines or cell phones or whatever else. That has a productive capacity that the city benefit or the countrymen benefit from. The economy at large, you produce something of value that produces more things of value. That's why it's good for that. This is just a net loss. It's great only for those companies building the bombs, and then the bombs go somewhere else to get used over here. So it is bad for Britain. It's bad for America. It's bad for Europe at large, and it is catastrophic for Ukraine. And Russia doesn't want to fight this war. people keep saying, well, they don't want to have a ceasefire. No, they do. They want to have a ceasefire. They want to have an end of war negotiation. They would prefer to end this war via negotiations with the ugly terms that they are now demanding instead of fighting for it. But they will fight for it until they have it. And all we can do, folks, is just show you the truth. It is just tragic. I was going to say sad, but it's worse than that. It's tragic just to see what these people like this are doing, these experts, because so many people keep putting a microphone in their face. People keep listening to them. We're getting bigger, and I'm grateful for that. And by the way, if you haven't, be sure and like this video and subscribe if you haven't done that already. That helps us expand this, because more people need to hear the truth that you're hearing today. We need to expand on that so that when people make these kinds of comments, more people are able to say, that is nonsense. What are you doing? And call them out and hold them accountable. Too few people get held account in the mainstream mess and whatever mainstream media in whatever country that we're talking about. People like you watching shows like this and spreading this thing around can undermine that nonsense and that catastrophic result that's happening for the Ukraine side. You may be one of our best allies and our best assets to try to bring this thing to an end. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. And by the way, one thing I didn't even mention anything on here is that Russia is about to unleash a new, in fact, may already have, that's a current present tense there, new offensive to win the war is what it's looking like at 2 p.m. today. I didn't talk about that here because I'm gonna give you all that there. But aside from just the drone issue, there are much bigger issues involved here, and you're not going to want to miss that at 2 p.m. today. Thank you very much, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.